everybody. Happy Monday. I'm Stephanie Haney.
I'm Mike Polk. What are we doing here on Monday, Stephanie?
We
usually do this on a Wednesday.
Special edition of Ohio Has Issues.
I see. That's right. Why are we doing the special one?
It's a special Monday here on President's Day. There is a forum happening tonight at the University of Finley.
Not a debate between our Senate primary rivals. It is a forum. And what is the difference?
Yes. Big important difference here is that we are actually going to have the opportunity to hear questions that the students have submitted to ask these candidates. So that's what we'll be hearing from them. We've got a little bit of a preview, which we'll get to shortly, on what we might expect to hear from those students. But that's the big thing. There will actually be questions from the people in the audience.
Usually I find, though, like that the difference between a forum and a debate is in a debate they're standing up yelling at each other, and in a forum they often are sitting in comfortable chairs yelling at each other.
Oh, well.
But maybe this will be different. That's just from my personal experience. This could be very civil, and we might learn a lot.
Well, I look forward to seeing whether they're sitting or standing personally.
It is almost, because it's almost election time. These guys got to make some moves here, right? We're a month away, actually, from actual election day. Can you believe that?
Yes, March 19th is when the primary is here in the state of Ohio, which is absolutely wild to think about. You know, we've been talking about these candidates that will be talking in this forum tonight. So the candidates that we're going to hear from tonight are Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan. We've also got Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose and business person Bernie Marino.
That's what we're calling him, business person. I guess that's right. I mean, he's a successful business person.
If there's a different moniker, I'm certainly open to it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
But I think that's what I've heard on the street.
That makes sense.
And here's the deal with this, okay? So yes, it's February 19th. The primary is coming up on March 19th. One of those three guys is going to be the contender against the current Democratic U.S. Senator for the state of Ohio. So one of those three will compete against U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, which I think we have a graphic of. There he is. There's that face that we were looking for. So those three guys are competing for the chance to take on U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown in the race to see who will be the next U.S. Senator for the state of Ohio.
Truly our most gravelly voiced senator. Can we all agree?
I think
Ohio's
so.
gravelly voiced senator. He's got the graveliest voice, but it's powerful still at the same time. So the debates would be great.
Obviously, big deal tonight. We're going to hear more from them. We had an opportunity back on January 22nd to hear from the three Republican candidates. Of course, now we have an opportunity to hear a little bit more from them. So that's happening at the University of Finley tonight. That starts at 8 p.m. It's hosted by Spectrum News. So I got the opportunity to talk with the person who will be hosting this forum tonight. That's Mike Kallmeyer. He's a Spectrum News anchor and host of In Focus Ohio. So let's check out that conversation, see what we can expect tonight. All right, I'm here now with Mike Kallmeyer, the Spectrum News anchor, who will be hosting this forum at the University of Finley. Mike, as the host of In Focus Ohio, what do you think are some of the top issues that voters are paying attention to this election cycle?
Well, I don't think this election cycle goes without saying that it will be the biggest, most exciting, most dramatic general election that we've ever seen. I know, Stephanie, we say that every 4 years. Maybe sometimes it's true, maybe sometimes it's not. But I think it really holds true this year when you got a possible Trump-Biden matchup. We'll see what happens with that. And then these interesting races, like here in Ohio for that Senate seat, Sherrod Brown versus one of these three challengers. No doubt, Stephanie, I think the top three issues, and we'll explore these a lot during our forum, probably more than one question each, is economy, border, and abortion. Maybe not so much in that order, but those are the top three. Economy, let me touch on that just a little bit. Just conflicting messages between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So you may see these three candidates more in line with each other, although there will be some slight differences. But on one hand, you have the Treasury Secretary or the White House saying that things are looking better. They will be better as far as inflation goes. Just give us time and you won't have to worry about this. On the flip side of the aisle, the Republicans are saying this is as bad as it ever is and this will get better. Does the truth lie in the middle? Maybe, maybe not. But that's one of the questions to these candidates is what they will do about inflation, what they will do about the economy. They might have similar answers, and maybe this is more of a contrast when it comes to that general election. Who wins one of these three versus Sherrod Brown? The prices, of course, of the average Ohioan, just like the rest of the people across the country, rent, insurance, daycare, groceries, it's wages versus rising prices too, and that's a factor in this economy. You got a couple businessmen. You're kind of fortunate in Northeast Ohio, where you have two of the candidates that you're very familiar with, Matt Dolan and Bernie Moreno, who are in a sense very good business people and have spent their life doing this. So they have a unique perspective on what to do about economy, what to do about inflation.
Okay, we'll definitely be looking for answers on those particular topics. Now, you're hosting this U.S. Senate GOP primary forum. It's not a debate. So for people who aren't necessarily familiar, can you talk to us about what that format will look like?
Yeah, it'll look a lot like a debate. There's a fine line between debate and forum. Basically, a forum allows you a little bit more conversational, a little bit more input from outside parties. We're going to take some questions from the students at the University of Finley. Now, they won't be on a microphone, but we have already received questions from them, and those will be included in the forum. But it'll look a lot like that first debate that you saw that was done by Colleen Marshall and Joe Toohey, where it is somewhat like a debate where each candidate gets a chance to respond to each question. And also, if a candidate calls out someone by name, we saw a little bit of that in the first go around, they will get a chance, a short time to respond to that. So I'd say it's a forum/debate. It'll look somewhat like a debate, but be a little looser, more of a forum to include a little bit more discussion.
Okay, and this is happening, as you mentioned, at the University of Finley in the Weinbrenner Auditorium. So who's invited to this? What's the audience that's going to be live at the forum look like?
Yeah, sure. Mostly students, University of Finley students, a lot of teacher, administrators, and some town folk as well. So it'll be a nice mix of everything. There will not be microphones set up for questions, but we have already pre-received the questions from that audience in anticipation of this. So it'll be a nice setting. There will be some subjects that specifically deal with campus settings and education. A lot of questions that were submitted, I can tell you, from these students on higher ed. Questions of, we've seen it in Ohio, with Senate Bill 83, I believe, last year, with the freedom of speech in the classroom. Each side claims that to be for freedom of speech in the classroom, both sides of the aisle. And it's an interesting debate of what you can say inside the classroom, who's shut down, who is censored in a sense. The other issue that they submitted was that the repaying of the college loans. So that's kind of understandably so. That is on their radar as well. And then, of course, a lot of the students submitted questions about reproductive rights and abortion. I want to touch on that just briefly, because that's obviously going to be at least a couple questions on reproductive rights and abortion. That's going to be a huge issue this coming election. Maybe more so than the Republicans want. The Democrats are certainly going to make it a big issue. And what will they do as a senator? We'll ask each candidate, what will they do as a senator with this abortion question? Will they consider a federal ban on abortion? Are they happy with how Ohio decided this issue last year? So we will ask each of them this question. I've always focused in on, we'll do this on March 19th during the primary too. We're going to focus in on each county here on Spectrum News 1. I'm sure your station will be doing the same. I always focus on 3 counties when it comes to this abortion issue. They are rural, not rural, but outside of the city, very successful, a lot of retail, a lot of wealth in these counties. Outside of Cincinnati, it's Butler County. Outside of Columbus, it's Delaware County. Where you are, outside of Cleveland, it's the Lorain County. They're very similar counties, always red. They voted for Trump in the last few elections. However, when state issue 1 came up, abortion rights, they voted overwhelmingly for access to abortion rights. These 3 relatively younger, wealthier red counties went the way of abortion rights. So even though you might say that abortion and reproductive rights is something much more for the general election, when the winning candidate here goes against Sherrod Brown, I wouldn't say that it's out of the question on this primary, because there's a lot of moms in these 3 counties out there, women across the state as well as men, that really want to know where these candidates fall on the abortion issue. The number of weeks, are they for an outright ban? What would they do on the federal level? A lot of questions surrounding that.
It is interesting we find ourselves in this position now because, as you mentioned, we had issue 1 in the November election in 2023, and a lot of people thought, well, that's decided in Ohio. But now, for this to be a question of what these people would do if they do make it to federal office as the senators representing Ohio, it is interesting that we are still talking about this here in Ohio.
Yeah, very interesting because there's been I think each candidate needs to really define themselves on the abortion issue before they face Sherrod Brown for the general election. We've seen with all three, we've seen a little shifting of this. Well, the state should decide, but I would consider the federal, if I'm elected senator, I would consider this. So I think they're still trying to really pinpoint their position, and they need to do that by the general election.
Now, we talked about what seems to be top of mind for the voters. We talked about what seems to be resonating with the students. Anything else you want to let us know that's on your list that we can expect to hear about in the issues to be discussed at the forum?
Yeah, all kinds of things that we plan to ask. Timing is an issue. We won't get to everything that we would like to. It's an hour, and with these three, as with any politician, I suppose, time can go quick, but they will be somewhat on a timer. I'll try to do my best. We're not going to have an electric shock or anything like that, but I'll do my best to keep them on track and keep keep things going and keep getting to different issues. But some of the things I would love to get to, and we will get to those things that I previously mentioned, but foreign policy as well. Certainly, the Ukraine situation, the situation in Israel. We are on a college campus, so the situation in Israel / Hamas and how that relates to a college campus. We've seen some images and things from college campuses that surprise some, don't surprise others. So that could come up. Foreign policy, trade. They talk about wars, also culture wars, the culture war right here at home. Those are kind of fair game questions, especially when you're right there on a college campus with a bunch of students in the crowd. Certainly transgender issue, that will come up. I can promise you that. Senator Matt Dolan and others in the Republican Party voted to override the DeWine veto of House Bill 68. So that's a huge issue as far as can transgender athletes compete in girls' sports? What about bathrooms? All those sorts of things. We will explore those and ask the candidates those questions. And the big one is also Trump endorsement, the effect of that. Of course, Bernie Moreno has that endorsement. The others say they are Trump people as well, so they're trying to hitch their wagons as much as they can to that. But that's another question of how this affects this race.
Okay, Mike, one more question for you before we let you go here. Well, two questions, actually. Have you been told any topics are off limits by the candidates?
No, I don't think any. I can't imagine any that would be. Of course, we don't get into any personal matters or anything like that. The previous debate hosted by Colleen and Joe, I thought was very well done. And the candidates they got at each other a little bit. They criticized and kind of, got on each other, but to a degree there was just normal, healthy politics. Nothing like we've seen on the national level, but nothing's off the table. And then your other question was?
My last question for you is how you plan to handle any real-time fact checking, because that can
that's really tricky. I thought they did a great job on the last debate as well. In real time, it's really hard to do that fact checking. I think the candidates and the audience and the viewers help us out and do it themselves. We will at Spectrum One here after the fact do a full report, picking out each individual factoid that might have been challenged or maybe wasn't challenged. Maybe we just think it needs looking into. We'll do that. Real time on the scene, that's probably not going to happen. But the candidates, if you notice, they do that themselves as well, which is great. They say, please check that. That's not true. Check it out. Of course, the audience can do that as well. And it's something the viewers can always look into as well.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for your time. It's going to be a busy night, and we look forward to seeing what the candidates have to say.
I appreciate it, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that was Mike Kallmeyer. He is the host of the forum tonight that's happening at the University of Finley. So he'll be the one who's trying to wrangle those candidates and asking those questions.
I don't know that gentleman, but I feel like he knows what he's talking about, and I feel like he's going to do a good job. Don't you?
Oh, yeah, he was definitely...
Very professional. He knew his stuff. And I like that he was saying that he was going to push them for some specific answers too, and I hope that he gets them.
I hope so too.
To help people make decisions. I mean, that's going to be a tricky thing for everybody to actually come out with their decision on and say, this is where I stand. Like, for example, the federal abortion that they were talking about, possibly passing a law. At what week do they want to start? He said he's going to try and pin them down on that. I think that those answers will be of great interest to Ohioans, and we know that we just heard these questions in advance. He told you the questions in advance. I'm assuming that they probably know these questions are coming, so they've had time to prepare their answers. They've already been asked, but now they know they're going to try. He's going to try and pin them down tonight and say, where do you really stand on this?
Yeah, I don't think there are necessarily any major surprises what the candidates will hear based on what we talked about. You know, these are the major issues that we've been talking about and continue to talk about. Of course, I did think it was interesting on the abortion issue that he mentioned those 3 key counties that we'll be paying attention to. So Butler, Delaware, and Lorain counties here in the Ohio area. They've been red, but they voted to pass issue 1 in November, as he said. So we'll hear again from Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State LaRose, and also we'll see the comments from Bernie Moreno on what they said previously on abortion. So we'll be comparing whether what they say tonight tracks with what they said most recently at that January 22nd debate.
As you said, I mean, this is a month away now. These guys have to make a move right now to stand out, and that's what I'd be looking for today. I think that they are going in prepped to try and, because realistically, not everybody's going to watch this entire forum. We're probably I would say not even a plurality of Ohio might be watching this Senate primary forum day. But if you can get a soundbite out of it, if you can make some kind of move that actually makes you stand out at this point, which is what these guys are trying to do, to pull away from one another, I'd say that that's probably what they'll be trying to do. Probably have some rehearsed lines that they're waiting to bring out at the right time and find the right positioning for them.
And listen, we get it. It is a long election year. It is going to be a long election year. We know it's a lot to pay attention to, all of the nitty gritty on this stuff. So that's why we're here. We're doing the show. Ohio Has Issues, so we can bring you the highlights and we can talk about what they're saying that might be most important to you.
And just a reminder, we don't pretend to know much about any of this stuff, but we bring on experts and people to talk to who do know this stuff and cover this stuff professionally to tell us and then you about what's going on with it. For example, talk about some of the people we have on after the forum to try and put some insight into it.
Oh yeah, we're going to have people from both sides of the aisle. So we'll have a couple Republicans. We've got Republican strategist Mehek Cooke, and then we also have former Cuyahoga County Commissioner Lee Weingart. So we'll be talking with them in the 9 o'clock half hour, which will be coming up here faster than you think. And then at 9:30, we'll be talking with 2 Democratic representatives. So we've got former Ohio representative and current president and CEO of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus Foundation, Shayla Davis. And then we also have Jeff Rusnak, who is a Democratic strategist. So we'll be talking with them at 9:30, and they'll be giving us their live reaction to what happened. I want to thank those University of Finley students for bringing up the issue of student loan repayment. I'm very interested in that topic specifically.
It'll be interesting to see how they respond to that. And he said that there will be the students, he pretty much tipped his hand because they've got the students' questions in advance, which is another thing. I do wonder if the candidates also get the questions in advance from the students so they can prep. I don't know. I would like to know that. But regardless, they have these questions in advance, so I'm assuming they've been approved. In other words, nobody's just going to stand up and do anything real weird, because they already have them in advance, and they've probably been approved to a certain degree. But he did mention that they are specifically, the students seem specifically curious about the education bills here in Ohio that are going on right now, including House Bill 83, which is, I believe, has passed but is not in law yet. But that's Jerry Serino's law that is trying to push back at some alleged liberal bias in colleges. And so we're going to hear what the college students here at Finley have to say about that. And they might be all for it, for all we know. I do have some Finley facts if you'd like to hear them.
I would love to hear some Finley facts.
Okay, because this is going to be at the University of Finley, which is a small college right here in Ohio. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it in case for some reason, if you don't know about Finley, we should have put some great music under this. We'll do it in post. It's a private Christian university founded in 1882, Finley College is. It has an enrollment of nearly 4,200 students. This is all according to Wikipedia, so you know it's true. Actually use their website as well, so to confirm these. They have approximately 1,250 students living on campus. Okay, their men's basketball team, by the way, won the NCAA Division II National Championship in 2009. Nice job.
How about that? Go Finley.
You might be wondering, what's their nickname? They're the Oilers. And their mascot is Derek the Oiler.
There he is. There's Derek the Oiler.
That's a fun guy.
He looks very festive.
He does. So their motto at Finley College, did you know the motto of Finley College by any chance?
I don't, but I bet I'm going to learn it.
It's embarrassing that you don't know. It is Scientia Liberatis et Religio.
Okay, I didn't know it was going to be in a different language.
I don't even know.
So I still don't know what the motto of Finley is.
It's knowledge, liberty, and religion.
Okay.
President Catherine Fell. Their school colors are orange and black. Bengals don't care for it.
Also the same colors as the Massillon Washington Tigers, which was my high school rival, being from Massillon Perry.
Probably intentional.
I am not holding it against you though, Finley.
The university is especially well known for its equestrian studies program, offers an equestrian riding as a varsity sport. And if any of my friends from Kent State are watching right now, that's a fancy way of saying that they have a horsey school. A couple more Finley facts, and then we're going to get these people going, because it's President's Day, and we got a debate to get to here. Oh, it established the very first bachelor's degree in hazardous waste studies at Finley.
Wow.
It's interesting.
I wonder what the instigation for that was.
I don't know, but those people have great business cards. The campus is home to the Mazza Museum, which contains the largest collection of children's book illustrations in the United States. They did not draw them. They're from children's books that adults drew, so they're better than they would be if it were the other way. A couple of notable alumni before we get you out of here to this debate at Finley College. We're going to take you right there here soon. Well, we'll actually just talk all the way through it.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk through
all the way through it.
We're going to bring you the updates because it's being hosted by Spectrum News, so we can't take it.
Yeah. The U.S. representatives that are from there are 3 different U.S. representatives that went to Finley. That's Tennyson Geyer and Clint Cole and Ralph Cole, the Cole brothers. They were both reps. American fashion model Joni Dodds, WWE ringside commentator Vic Joseph, and American fly fishing writer John Gierich, all notable Finley alumni.
I wish I would have known we were going to mention that WWE guy, because I would have put that in the YouTube information, because I bet you we would have picked up some internet hits from that, because WWE is a big thing.
She's always working the algorithm, folks.
Trying to. Okay, listen, so we are not going to take you to the forum tonight, but we do have something great coming up for you in the next half hour. So here's what we have coming up from 8 to 8:30 here on Ohio Has Issues. We're going to pull up that graphic and let you know. So we've got comments from Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State Frank LaRose. And then we're also going to check back in with you live throughout the forum, because we'll be watching it. So we'll bring you updates. We'll bring you kind of keynotes as they happen, live updates. And we've also got some other fun things in store for you, coming up through the rest of it. But that's what we've got coming up in the next half hour.
Yeah, if we see something weird, we'll pop back in and say, hey, you might have noticed this, or if there's a key point that somebody is, we think needs to be illustrated, then we'll stop and say hi.
And while we're doing it, you'll be able to enjoy the live shot of our bustling newsroom.
Oh yeah, people be walking around back there. You can look, somebody might trip. You never know.
We're going to actually go to that right now, and then we'll be back in just a little bit with more for you here on Ohio Has Issues. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ohio Has Issues. I'm Stephanie Haney. We are here talking about the Republican Senate candidate. That's a little bit of a tongue twister. Senate candidate primary race between Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and business person Bernie Moreno. They're at the University of Finley tonight. They're having a conversation right now that's being moderated by Mike Kallmeyer of Spectrum News. So we want to talk a little bit about why this is important right now here in the state of Ohio. So I'm going to give you some facts right now. Currently, Democrats have a slim hold on the U.S. Senate, 51 to 49 in Congress, okay? West Virginia's Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is not seeking re-election. It is believed to be pretty likely that Republicans will flip that seat. Now, Ohio, along with Arizona and Montana, are the three other states that Democrats are considered not to be safe when it comes to holding Senate seats. Current Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown in Congress, he's held a seat since 2017, but Ohioans favored Republican Donald Trump in 2016 and in the 2020 presidential races. Also, Ohioans picked Trump's pick Senator J.D. Vance in 2022. That's when he was running against experienced Democrat Tim Ryan. Now, that was to replace a retiring Republican. So not necessarily all things equal, but definitely all things on Ohio. It's going to be one of the most important one of the most important Senate races here in Ohio. So we're going to hear from the candidates, which I spoke to previously while that conversation is ongoing at the forum. One of the things that we talked about, which I'll get to in just a minute, was what they view to be the most important issue in Ohio. But I do want to remind people why we're not hearing from Mr. Bernie Moreno in this particular show. And it is because I tried to reach Bernie Moreno's campaign many times. I tried to reach him an embarrassing number of times. Actually, not embarrassing because I'll just keep contacting until they do get in touch. But you know, if you were just trying to catch up with a friend or something, it would actually be very funny, the number of times that I tried to reach him. Even actually texted a phone number that is known to belong to Mr. Moreno. So I did reach out. His campaign did not schedule, but we do still have his perspective that's available from public posts. So our first conversation that we're going to bring you tonight that I had with Senator Dolan and Secretary of State LaRose is on the question of what's the most important issue to Ohioans. So let's go to that now. What do you think is the most important issue to Ohioans right now?
Well, I think for Ohio Republicans, it's the border and the economy. I think people are understanding that you can't really have a sovereign nation unless your border is secure. And we've seen record amounts of people coming over the border that we don't know who they are, we don't know what their intentions are. And as a result, not everyone, but as a result, we're seeing fentanyl deaths in Ohio increasing. We're seeing human trafficking. Right now, Ohio is fourth in human trafficking in the country. And that's because of our location, our highway system, but it's all stemming from an open border. And then get our economy back together. I mean, things cost more. You know it, it's 17% more, but let's put it this way. If you had $40 and you're going in the grocery store today and going in the grocery store 5 years ago, your $40 got a lot more 5 years ago.
What do you think is the most important issue to Ohioans right now?
Well, there's really three that I'm focused on, but the top one is the economy. It's this economy under Sherrod Brown and Joe Biden that's hurting Ohio families because the cost of everything is higher, but wages aren't rising to keep up with it. And so normal families like ours have to sit at the kitchen table at the end of the month and figure out which bills they can pay and which bills they can't pay. It's concerning to me, though, that the solutions that are offered by Biden and Brown aren't really solutions at all. They think hiring 80,000 IRS agents and spending, hundreds of billions of dollars on green energy mandates that don't work is somehow going to repair our economy. We know that the real solution is to get government out of the way so that Ohio's really private sector industry can thrive. That's the solution. The other two issues that I've really focused on are border security, where I have some very personal experience having served down there as part of a counter-narcotics task force, and also parents' rights, because I think that's the most important job any of us could ever have. And I know that Lauren and I are not interested in co-parenting with the government. We want our children to be raised with our values.
All right, here are the comments we found from Mr. Bernie Moreno. These are quoted from his website on his Why I'm Running page. So He listed 15 priorities. The first 3 of them were: first, empower parents to make education choices; second, secure America's borders, stop amnesty, and destroy the Mexican drug cartels; and then third, restore the integrity of our elections. Now, since election integrity was specifically mentioned by Mr. Marino, here are comments from Secretary of State LaRose, who has a particular reason to speak on this. Being the Secretary of State, he is the person responsible for making sure our elections are fair and safe and secure here in Ohio. So here's my conversation with him about that.
It was on January 5th of 2021. Your office had released a post-election audit, and it talked about Ohio's 2020 election, and it said the tallies were nearly perfect. Here's a quote from you: "Elections are run better and more honestly than really I think they ever have been." And then later you had posted on social media another quote from you that mainstream media is trying to minimize voter fraud to suit their narrative, and that President Donald Trump is right to say that voter fraud is a serious problem. So I want to ask you what you meant by that at a national level.
Yeah, listen, this is something that those two are not inconsistent in any way. Ohio runs trustworthy elections. We have a post-election audit where we count the hard copy paper and compare it to the electronic result. We have the bipartisan oversight of our elections where both D's and R's work together to make that happen. We have testing of our voting machines before each election to make sure that there's no connection to the internet, to make sure that they're tabulating accurately, and on and on. There are so many things that Ohio does. But the key is that other states don't do many of these things, right? And it's our responsibility as citizens to question anything government does. And so when Ohioans, when Americans see the way other states run elections and have concerns about it, it's all right to call them out. Now, what happened in 2020, in my opinion, in other states that shouldn't have happened was last minute lawsuits, just maybe days or weeks before the election, changing the rules at the last minute. What I called crisis opportunism, where certain secretaries of state just ignored longstanding practices. And because there was a pandemic, extended deadlines arbitrarily or stopped verifying signatures on absentee ballots. All bad ideas. These are things that need to be called out so that they're not repeated in the future. And it's important that we be skeptical and hold our elected officials accountable and insist that they learn from the past so that those mistakes aren't repeated.
Specifically here in Ohio, then, are you confident in what happened here in 2020 and then also what we'll see happen in November in 2024 in terms of the election?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, the way Ohio runs elections is the model for other states to follow. And it's important for Ohioans to understand that. We even have a web page that we've created, voteohio.gov/secure, at the Ohio Secretary of State's website, that can give people a deep dive into all of the different security procedures that we have in place. And I challenge Ohioans to learn for themselves. Sign up to be an election official. You can be one of the 30,000 Ohioans that it takes to run election day by signing up at voteohio.gov to be a poll worker. It's a great thing to do. And I think you'll come away from the experience knowing why I can say with confidence that we make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat in Ohio.
All right, that was Secretary of State LaRose giving comments on election integrity and how his comments may have shifted over time. Now, I think that was a great opportunity there to talk to people about potentially working as poll workers here in Ohio. Did you hear that? 30,000 people required to make our elections run here in the state of Ohio. Thank you very much to the people who do that, who put in those long hours, early mornings on election day, late nights, and making sure that we get the results and we can trust them here in Ohio. Now, I also previously asked Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State LaRose why they are the right candidate to choose in this Senate Republican primary race. Here's their comments on that. Why are you the right candidate to be chosen by Republicans in the primary on March 18th to run for the U.S. Senate here in Ohio?
Well, the number one reason is I am best prepared to beat Sherrod Brown. I have built a campaign that can beat Sherrod Brown. I have a record of achievement that independent voters, by the way, independent voters make up more than Republicans and Democrats combined. But my conservative record has helped all Ohioans. I mentioned before, conservative budget, Democrats vote for it. So I have a record that can go right after them. I have had success in areas of the state that Sherrod Brown has to do extremely well in. When you only win 16 of the 88 counties, he has to run up the big numbers in those counties. I can go right after him. But finally, I think Ohioans are going to see me as a consistent conservative representative who puts Ohio's first. And I have a record. I could say there are many times, where I voted that maybe wasn't in my best political interest, but it was in Ohio's best interest. And then compare my record to Sherrod Brown. This is not going to be personal. This is who has a vision for Ohio, who has a vision for America, and who can execute on it. Sherrod Brown's been in Washington for lots and lots of years. The challenges are still here today. Let's get them done. And I think Ohioans will see me as somebody who's going to go and work for them.
Why are you the right candidate to represent the Republican ticket for the U.S. Senate seat for Ohio?
Well, I took an oath when I was 18 years old. That's a solemn promise. That was when I enlisted in the United States Army. I was making a commitment, a lifelong commitment, that this country is so precious that it's worth fighting for and even worth dying for. I continue to keep that commitment today as a reservist in the United States Army. And if we don't act soon, we're going to leave this country weaker, poorer, and less secure. We'll be the first generation in American history to leave this country weaker, poorer, and less secure than it was handed to us. I, for one, will be darned if that'll happen on our watch. If we're going to fix that, if we're going to put this country truly back on the right track, it begins with defeating Sherrod Brown so we can take back the Senate majority, and then sending somebody to Washington who actually shares Ohio's values, who's going to fight to restore this economy through free market principles, who's going to secure the southern border. And again, I served down there as part of a counter-narcotics task force. I've experienced this. I'm the only one that has a detailed plan to send 3 military divisions to the border so that we can end the invasion that's occurring, build the wall, and make sure that we take away the incentive for people to come here illegally. There must be no amnesty, because a law that's not enforced is not a law. It's just a suggestion. And I'm the candidate that has been very clear about restoring parents' rights. As the only candidate in this race with 3 school-age children, and I'll be one of very few members of the Senate that has school-age children, I want to make sure that we put parents back in charge of educational decisions and healthcare decisions related to their children. Those are the values that I share with my fellow Ohioans, and that's why I'm going to be their Republican nominee and their next U.S. Senator.
Okay, here are the comments now that we were able to find from Bernie Moreno on why he's the right Republican candidate. This is a quote from BernieMoreno.com. Quote, "I am running for the United States Senate because for too long, the men and women who move Ohio forward, American workers, have been left behind by career politicians like Sherrod Brown and Joe Biden." A continuing quote from Mr. Moreno from his website, "All public policy priorities in America should revolve around a simple concept: what is good for American workers and families. All elected officials should strive to create a growing middle class where the American dream is accessible to anyone, regardless of their background." All right, that's it for our second half hour here on Ohio Has Issues, the special edition, which is continuing while the Senate forum is happening in Finley. Coming up in the next half hour, we'll have more comments from Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State Frank LaRose, as well as the comments that we found publicly from Mr. Moreno. And then we'll also bring you updates about what's happening live in the Senate primary candidate forum. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
And the forum is now moving towards the topic of abortion. You had the chance to sit down with two of the candidates and speak with them about that. Is that right?
Yes, I did. So we'll hear those comments now from Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State LaRose. I want to talk to you a little bit about an issue that was brought up in the recent debate among the Republican Senate candidates here in Ohio, the issue of abortion here in Ohio. You and your candidates did say, your fellow candidates did say that you do support a stricter ban at a national level here in Ohio than Ohioans voted for last November. Why do you support that?
Well, my pro-life record has helped reduce abortions in Ohio. I am pro-life. I am for the 3 exceptions. And I think that's a pro-life record that reflects more of what Ohio's really want. Issue 1 went too far. It does allow for late-term abortions. I think most Ohioans didn't know that. But the reality is, in a political environment in 2024, it's my pro-life record that I've been consistent about that I can present to all Ohioans and say, okay, here's somebody who understands our positions. My opponents are really disingenuous on this issue because they've been all over the place. And I think on this issue, you should always be consistent. But on this issue, you can't take one position because you think it helps you in a primary and then take another position when you realize that's completely out of step with most Ohioans. I think in a 24 election, my pro-life stance can beat Sherrod Brown.
When you talk about the current Ohio State Constitution that was voted for in November, and you say that it allows for late-term abortions, can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm for the 3 exceptions, which is the life of the mother and any pregnancy as a result of rape or incest. What the issue 1 did is it added, if in the determination of the doctor or the patient that it's in best interest of the health of the mother, the pregnancy can be terminated. There was no definition of what that meant. Is that the mental health of the mother? Is that the physical health of the mother? Or is it the physical health of the mother? So really what it does is it opened the door to terminating a pregnancy at any point during the pregnancy. And that's out of step with where most Ohioans are.
Are you aware, based on the Ohio State health statistics, that there have been a limited number of abortions after the 25-week period here in Ohio since 2013?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we hope this is rare. Mm-hmm. It should not be in our Constitution. But again, Stephanie, I think that's a result of my pro-life record that abortions are being reduced overall. I mean, that's ultimately the goal. We want women to carry the pregnancy to term, and if they're unable for whatever reasons not to be with the child, that we have adoptions necessary, that we make sure that baby gets the health care that they need. But I agree, yeah, we want to reduce it, but it shouldn't be in our Constitution at all. It shouldn't happen once.
You and your fellow candidates for the Senate seat for the Republican ticket here in Ohio generally agree on this issue. All of you had said at the Senate debate that you would support a stricter national abortion ban. What sets you apart from Mr. Bernie Moreno and also Secretary of State Frank LaRose?
Well, I have been consistent in my position on abortion. I have not changed because it helps me in a political primary. I've taken votes that I have been consistent with my record. So I think people understand that I will approach this issue in a consistent manner with best interest of Ohioans in mind. And my opponents are using it as a political football, and they're going back and forth. I mean, the reality is we fought hard to return this issue to the states. But if the result of going to the states is that we are going to have late-term abortions and other extreme positions in my mind as part of the states, then I think we ought to look at, now you call it a ban, I would say we ought to look at a period of time upon which the abortion procedure is available, but then after a certain short period of time, it's not. I mean, that's how I would phrase it.
So generally speaking here in Ohio, just to kind of put this in a clear picture here. In Ohio, the point of viability has been established at generally 22 weeks. You think that 7-week period is too much here in Ohio, between 15 weeks and 22 weeks?
Well, viability is also based on, current standards, and so there are some babies that have survived outside the mother's womb at 19 weeks. So is a baby viable at 19 weeks? So that's one of the issues with basing it on viability. Like, we're great in Cleveland. We have access to tremendous medical procedures. So the viability in Cleveland might be different than it is in some rural areas. So that's why it's difficult just to simply do it on viability. But again, this is a terrible decision. Terrible. But I do believe there should be a period of time with the exceptions, and then we shouldn't have abortion after that.
All right, I want to touch now on some of the things that were discussed in the recent debate with your fellow competitors who are hoping for the Republican nomination here for the Ohio U.S. Senate seat. In that conversation, abortion was a topic of the discussion, and you said that you would support a national abortion ban when Ohio voters have just enshrined abortion protection into the state constitution here up to viability. So that's generally understood by medical professionals at 22 weeks. You didn't say how many weeks you would support a national abortion ban at. Can I ask you that question now? What week number would that be for you?
Well, this is not something that we negotiate in an interview between a journalist and a prospective member of the Senate. This is something that gets worked out among the 100 members of the Senate when I'm serving there. As a pro-life Ohioan, I'm going to do things that we can do to protect life. But I want to correct you on a couple things. What was passed in Ohio last year is not only legalizing abortion up to viability. It really, in many ways, is the most extreme abortion law in the country. It allows abortion all the way through the end of pregnancy. It takes parents out of the equation when it's involving a minor child. Those are things that are really not consistent with what most Americans, most Ohioans believe. That's really a pretty extreme position. What I've said, and I don't use the word ban, but there should be national standards. We're, as a country, not a group of people that believe in late-term abortion, just days or weeks before the child is born. Those are things that I think involve and deserve a national conversation, but I'm not going to negotiate a specific number of weeks or exceptions or whatever else. What I want to do is do things that we can do that affirm life. But we also need to be thoughtful about this. It's not good enough to just be pro-birth. We have to, as pro-life Americans, be truly pro-life. And that means making sure that there are services available, that we embrace those life-affirming decisions by supporting pregnancy resource centers, making sure that programs like home visiting are available for first-time mothers that are making that decision to be a mom, and making sure that there's resources available to help them. Those are some of the things that I don't think get talked about enough. Also, making adoption easier, taking the bureaucracy out of the process, taking the cost out of the process. These are all things that need to be a total part of that conversation. It's not just what do you want to ban or what don't you want to ban. It's a more holistic conversation that needs to be had here.
I want to ask you to elaborate a little bit so we don't confuse anyone that may be listening or watching our interview here. When you talk about what's been enshrined into the Ohio Constitution, allowing abortion up to the end of the pregnancy, can you elaborate specifically what you mean on that? Because there are certain, limitations after viability in Ohio.
Yeah, the interesting thing about a constitutional amendment is that it creates a very few set of words that end up being interpreted over the years by courts. And there's roughly 250 words in that constitutional amendment that was passed last year that creates a constitutional right to abortion in Ohio. I was opposed to that because of some of the major loopholes that exist in that. It doesn't take a particularly creative lawyer to find ways to exploit those. And that was the concern I have. That's why this kind of thing really shouldn't be done as a constitutional amendment. Constitutions really should exist for the fundamental rules of how we govern our state and those really fundamental rights that we all broadly agree on, like First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, these things that we all kind of agree on as fundamental rights. Controversial issues of the day like this one really shouldn't be done as a constitutional amendment. That's the great concern that exists here. And I sincerely believe that what was passed last year in Ohio opens the door to things that most Ohioans consider a bad thing, like late-term abortions and taking away parental involvement, which is when a minor child is facing a crisis like an unplanned pregnancy, that child needs to have her family around her, supporting her, not be sort of taken away by some school official to a clinic without her parents knowing.
One more follow-up for you on this particular topic before we move on to something else. When in the state of Ohio, our state health records show that there hasn't been an abortion past 25 weeks since 2018, and there have only been 4 since 2013, do you think it's a good use of resources to focus on doing something at the national level that would change what Ohioans voted for in this last November election?
Well, you're talking about a time frame when we had done a number of life-affirming things in the state legislature to make that not a possibility that would happen. And so that has all changed as of November. I do think this is a conversation that needs to happen. But listen, this obsession with constantly talking about this issue, this is something that I find interesting, because it seems like that's the only thing Sherrod Brown wants to talk about. He can't talk about the economy with a straight face. He can't talk about the border, national security, domestic security. He can't talk about these things with a straight face. The only issue he wants to talk about is abortion. And really, he's the one that is the extremist on this issue. He supports late-term abortion, taking parents out of the conversation. That's the extreme view that, sure, there'll be a conversation about that going forward, but we're focused on other issues as well, like how do we grow this economy? How do we secure our border? How do we restore parents' rights? How do we restore America's strength and standing in the world? Those are some of the things that we also need to be talking about. I don't think Brown wants to talk about those because those are losing issues for him.
Now, when you talk about this particular issue, which we are moving on from, this is something that your competitors, Mr. Bernie Moreno and Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan, agree on. They agree on a national measure related to abortion. So I'm going to ask you, what sets you apart from Senator Dolan and Mr. Moreno?
Well, it's that I'm proven on this. Listen, any candidate that's running in a Republican primary is likely to call themselves pro-life. You'd be, I guess, foolish not to. The difference is, for these guys, it seems to be a newfound interest. I have a long track record of fighting for life. Ohioans know that. It's who I am. It's part of my belief set, and it's part of how I've governed over the years in the state legislature. So these guys may call themselves pro-life. Their background prior to when they decided they wanted to be elected to the U.S. Senate is very different. For example, Mr. Moreno sat on a board that gave massive amounts of money to pro-abortion groups like Planned Parenthood, but now he wants to claim that he's pro-life. Mr. Dolan has a very shoddy record when it comes to protecting life. I'm the consistent conservative on this, but also compassionate about it in the way we want to make sure that this is not just about banning things, it's about truly creating a life-affirming culture in the state of Ohio and throughout the country.
If you're having an amazing two-screen experience and watching the forum while you're hanging out here with us, then you know that things are getting pretty spicy right now, and they're talking about the abortion issue. Stephanie did not have the opportunity to speak with one of the candidates. Bernie Moreno was unavailable, although we did try vigorously, right, Stephanie?
Yes, absolutely vigorously.
But
Even sent a text message.
We do have his stance as he has laid it out so far, right, Stephanie?
Yes, he does support a 15-week federal abortion ban, supports what he calls common sense restrictions, and also exceptions for rape, incest, and to save the life of the pregnant person. Now, earlier we talked about why Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State LaRose think that they are the right candidate. Here's a little bit about why they are concerned about their competitors and what they would call red flags, maybe, for the other choices for the Republican ticket. Another general question for you about the competitors that you're facing in the upcoming March 19th primary. What do you think is the biggest red flag about Mr. Moreno and Secretary of State LaRose?
Well, first of all, I think either one of them would be better than Sherrod Brown. So let's get that on the record. But in the reality is in order for them to try to win a Republican primary, they are completely reinventing themselves to get Republican votes. And that will expose them tremendously in a campaign against Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown's never faced someone like me who has been consistent, transparent, and I've gotten results that help all Ohioans. I am a Republican who produced conservative budgets that Democrats voted for because they understood that I'm working for all Ohioans. That's where Bernie and Frank will fall down, that they are now changing who they are to fit a narrative for a Republican primary that the independent voter isn't going to be attracted to them, and Sherrod Brown is going to get to be able to tell a story that he's been in Washington 18 years as a senator, and we still have all these problems. That's what the issue has to be about, and I can take that right to him.
from a broader perspective, zooming out now to Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan and Mr. Marino, what do you think are the biggest red flags when it comes to your competitors hoping to get this candidacy?
Well, listen, I'm not a guy that wants to spend his time trashing my opponents, but there's a real difference between the two of us. Unlike them, I live in this economy the way that normal Ohioans do. Lauren and I are raising 3 children, living in a small suburban home, driving 6-year-old cars and trying to figure out how to pay our bills each month. That's very different from 2 of the wealthiest men in Ohio. We've got 52 members of the Senate currently who are millionaires. I don't think there's a lack of wealthy corporate elites in the U.S. Senate. What there aren't any is of Green Berets. I would be the first Army Green Beret to ever serve in the U.S. Senate. I think that special operations experience is valuable. Definitely sets me apart. Of course, I'm the proven conservative in this race. I'm also the one that has been able to win statewide elections. And if we want to beat a tough, entrenched Democrat incumbent like Sherrod Brown, one of the most liberal members of the United States Senate, it's foolish to send somebody into battle that's never won an election before. I've been able to win 4 statewide elections, done so with record-breaking numbers. I'm the guy that can beat Brown and also the proven conservative that'll go to DC and fight for our values. That's what Ohio conservatives are looking for over the next 7 weeks in this Republican primary.
All right, here's the closest thing we could find from Bernie Moreno on criticism of his competitors. This is him criticizing LaRose, and LaRose had said that former President Donald Trump told LaRose that he would not endorse anyone in this Ohio Senate primary race. So Bernie Moreno said, quote, "I think it's extremely horrific that Frank would have lied and said that President Trump told him something that he obviously did not tell him." And we did see Moreno double down on this criticism tonight in the forum. And then on Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan, he called out his changing comments about January 6th, or not his changing comments rather, but his comments about January 6th, and said about Senator Dolan, "If you want Liz Cheney to represent you as a United States Senator from Ohio, here's your choice." And this is from the debate on January 22nd. All right, coming up in the next half hour, here's what we have for you on Ohio Has Issues. We'll get Senate primary candidate forum reaction. That'll be from Republican strategist Mehek Cooke, and also from former Cuyahoga County Commissioner Lee Weingart. We'll be back with that in just a bit.
Well, the debate has now wrapped up, and we're about to get some live reactions from some people who actually know what's going on, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We've got Republicans that'll be talking with us within the next half an hour. One of those is Mehek Cooke. She's a Republican strategist. She is the president of American Frontier Strategies, a lawyer and a media consultant. She spent time working in the Ohio governor's office, also worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Ohio, and she serves as a surrogate for the Republican National Committee and media commentator for Americans for Prosperity. So that's one of our Republican representatives.
And you'll also be speaking with Republican Lee Weingart, who was a former Cuyahoga County commissioner, also helped bring the Browns back. He was a big part of that movement, so thanks for that. He's also the president of LNE Group, an international government affairs consulting firm. So they should have a lot to say, I would imagine, based on what we just saw. Got a little chippy at times, but for the most part, no real surprises, I didn't think. But it'll be interesting to see what the pros have to say.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely going to be asking that if there was anything they were surprised by, of many other questions. So we're going to take a little break. We're going to get that ready for you, and we'll be right back with Mehek and Lee in just a few minutes. All right, welcome back to Ohio Has Issues. Now we are here with live reaction from Republican representatives here on our panel. We're joining now with Mehek Cooke and Lee Weingart. So we'll say hello to them now. And Lee and Mehek, the first thing that I'll ask you, Lee, I'll start with you. Is there anything that was surprising to you in the forum tonight from the Republican candidates?
Nothing surprising. I think they're all very qualified. They did a nice job tonight enunciating their positions on a number of issues, from the border to Ukraine to fentanyl to abortion. You can tell it's late in the season because they're all very polished. They've got good answers. There are a few personal attacks. You can see particularly Frank LaRose to Bernie Moreno. But otherwise, I think it was a very good forum, informational, and I think they did a nice job.
And Mehek, I'll ask you the same question. Anything you were surprised by?
No, I agree with Lee. I think that this is finally an opportunity for Ohio voters to truly know where these candidates stand. And I think the biggest distinction that you're seeing today is all three candidates want to secure the border. Matt Dolan took it a step further and said he wants to seal, which means completely lock down. That was an interesting note. But I would have to say Bernie Moreno and Frank LaRose would probably agree with him. So I didn't see a lot of disagreement there. Foreign policy is really where I saw a lot of the candidates diverge. You had Frank LaRose, who's kind of in the middle. He wants to assess the situation. You have Matt Dolan, who wants to completely continue funding to Ukraine. And then Bernie Moreno, who's saying, let's secure our borders, let's secure America before we start doling out money to these foreign countries. So I think this could be a pivotal issue for Ohioans as we're looking to see what candidate stood out or what candidate distinguished themselves. But I think all three of them are qualified. And the goal today is really to beat Sherrod Brown, not each other.
Mehek, I'll stay with you for this question. When we're talking about some of the things we've seen being discussed by the candidates, one thing that keeps coming up is abortion. This is something Ohioans voted on in November to put it into our state constitution. It is also something that the candidates tend to agree on. We did see a comment made from Senator Dolan today about Secretary of State Frank LaRose going as far as saying it should be a 6-week abortion ban. They've all said there should be a stricter federal abortion ban than what's in the Constitution here in Ohio. How are you feeling about that from the Republican candidates?
Well, I think that if we're going to be honest, in the Republican Party, there's been a major shift by lots of candidates because this is an issue that I think a lot of Americans have struggled with, and they're still trying to figure out. Most Republicans are pro-life. You saw that on the stage today. They're now trying to understand, where's the culture? We definitely aren't where Sherrod Brown is, which is no exception, immediate, on-demand, full-term abortions. So I think all three candidates really distinguish themselves to try and say they are pro-life. They want to protect the life of an unborn. I think what Sherrod Brown and Democrats are going to do today, Stephanie, is they're going to continue to beat the abortion ban, continue to attack Republicans on this. And it's a losing strategy, but it's the only strategy they have because they haven't been able to secure the border. They haven't been able to even protect our economy. We can't afford food, groceries, gas prices, baby formula. So if abortion's the only route they can go, they'll try and divide the GOP. But I think we're smarter after seeing what happened in issue 1 with Ohioans.
And Lee, I'll ask you the same thing now. How are you feeling about this from the candidates?
So abortion is not a good issue for the Republicans. In the primary, you want to move as far to the right as you can. I mean, Frank LaRose talked about a 6-week limit. That's what issue 1, kind of was in the abortion vote back last November. But what I thought I saw tonight or heard tonight was more focusing not so much on the abortion itself, but I think Bernie Moreno talked about pro-life and pro-mom. Matt Dolan emphasized putting money into adoption. Frank LaRose also talked about issues that are kind of adjacent to, but not exactly abortion. And so Republicans are not going to win on abortion outright. Certainly not a 6-week ban. That's a no-go in the general election. So I think if you're going to be strictly pro-life, as all three of these Republicans are, you've got to emphasize that you care about the baby, not just in the womb, but in the world. And that's a winning strategy for Republicans. I heard some of that tonight. I think you'll hear a lot more of that in the general election when it's the sort of radical position of the Democratic Party, which is abortion on demand to the point of birth, versus Republicans who say, yes, abortion restrictions, but we also care about the child outside the womb.
All right, let's switch gears now and talk about a different proposed constitutional amendment here in Ohio. Ohioans could very well see a constitutional amendment proposed on the ballot in November that would mandate a certain minimum wage here in the state of Ohio. We saw the candidates discussing that a bit. Lee, what do you think about the comments that they made about potential minimum wage versus livable wage in Ohio?
Well, none of them gave us a number, that's for sure. No one said $15 or $20 an hour is a minimum wage, which is kind of the Republican standard, that we don't believe in minimum wages for the most part, although Republicans have in history supported minimum wages. But I think this modern Republican Party is not as friendly to minimum wage as maybe the prior Republican parties have been. The arguments that you hear about minimum wage raising inflation are illusory and probably not true. We'd be better off as a party, I think, taking a position on minimum wage that was a little more centrist, moderate. We might pick up some more votes in the working class, folks who maybe are thinking right now between Democrat and Republican. President Trump's done a very good job in 2016 and 2020 pulling working class Americans in the Republican Party. I think you could seal the deal with many of them if you thought about enunciating a real minimum wage.
Okay, and Mehek, what are your thoughts on the comments about the livable versus minimum wage tonight?
I have to agree with Lee. I mean, all three candidates really talked about how it's a path for prosperity, but minimum wage is not a livable wage. It is truly a starting stone for Ohioans to work their way up. I think that this is another issue that Democrats are going to run hard and strong on. Democrats waited to put minimum wage on the ballot when Sherrod Brown was going to also be on the ballot so that they could run this issue hard. Business owners, Ohioans, Republicans need to think very hard and smart about who we want dictating minimum wage. And again, I have to agree with all three candidates. We can't continue to throw numbers out there. It really has to be dependent on the businesses. We've been through COVID. We saw how many businesses shut down and weren't able to rebound. So I think that all three candidates gave some thoughtful answers in terms of allowing capitalism and allowing these businesses to really dictate what works for each business. One size does not fit all. So this is going to be one of those issues that is going to be very strong and led by Democrats to continue to push not only the leading candidate in the GOP, but also Ohioans to side with them.
All right, now let's move to the conversation of immigration. The candidates, again, sort of today, sticking with a common theme, talking about the need for border control, talking about the need to end human trafficking, drug issues here in Ohio and how that plays together. Now, there were some comments that were made about Marino's past quotes about not being able to throw people out who came here as children, LaRose's previous comments about the tough logistics of mass deportations. Mehek, how are you feeling about the candidates' stances on immigration at this point?
I think all three candidates honestly sounded the same. They want to secure the border. They want to build the wall. They've continued to say, which this is just common sense, under President Trump, we were stronger, we were more secure, we had a remain in Mexico policy. And the number one fundamental issue is enforce the law. We already have immigration laws on our books. So every candidate said that and stood by it. The one distinction I saw was Matt Dolan really talked about sealing that border. And I think that that's a step that we need to take. I didn't hear anybody say kick out children. I didn't hear anybody say anything extreme. I think what Ohioans want today, because we are a border state, is to enforce the law so that we feel secure and protected.
All right, and Lee, same question to you.
So I think of the three, Frank LaRose came off as probably the strictest, the most extreme. He said, no birthright citizenship, deport anybody who's here illegally, and I think that probably includes children, and no amnesty whatsoever. Matt Dolan's position clearly was seal the border, but he also talked about the importance of migrant workers in the United States, whether it be in agriculture or in retail or restaurants. And Bernie focused on finishing the wall that President Trump started to build. And then he went right to his endorsements on that question. He talked about Trump endorsement and all the other endorsements he's gotten. So I agree with Mehek that there's not much difference among the three candidates, although I think Frank LaRose took the most extreme position tonight when he talked about no birthright citizenship and deporting anybody who's here illegally.
That Trump endorsement is something that came up tonight in several different ways. Of course, Bernie Moreno mentioning a lot. There was also comments about Secretary of State Frank LaRose previously saying that Trump had told him that he would not make an endorsement in this race. Some conversation about who's lying or who is a liar or why someone would misrepresent those comments. So this is a two-part question. And Lee, I'll start with you. First, is the Trump endorsement the end-all be-all? Is it a foregone conclusion that Moreno will be the Republican candidate? And second, what do you think about Matt Dolan's comments about being the only person who hasn't had to delete posts that were negative towards the former president?
Well, if history is the guide, then the Trump endorsement is very important. In 2022, J.D. Vance was running in fourth place. He was a distant fourth place. He was endorsed by Donald Trump, and he was in first place within a week, and he went up to win the race and become U.S. Senator. I think the Trump endorsement is still very strong in Ohio, so that gives Bernie a great advantage. We haven't seen it in the polls yet. The polling, if you looked at the last poll, Bernie and Frank were within a point of each other, and Matt was not too far behind. And there were 40% undecided. So the question is, do the undecideds, are they moved? Are they influenced by the Trump endorsement? I don't know. Probably some will be. I thought Matt's answer was actually very clever, not having to, erase tweets that he had made previously, but also focusing on the things that he's done as state senator, cutting taxes, cutting regulations, creating school choice, aligning what he's done at the state level with what President Trump did at the federal level. So I thought that was a really good way for Matt to get around the question of the endorsement.
Okay, and Mehek, the same question to you.
Look, I think the Trump endorsement is a game changer. We saw it as history with J.D. Vance being number 4 and then skyrocketing to number 1. And I think this time it's going to be a game changer again because we have seen lawfare and weaponization against President Trump. So many individuals who may have sat on the fence not knowing who they were going to vote during the presidential are now diehard Trump supporters. That is going to trickle down into Ohio politics, and his endorsement is really going to carry the day. So it'll be a surprise if there's somebody else who's able to emerge as the front runner in the primary. But if we're just talking about the Trump endorsement, I think it's very strong. I think that a lot of Ohioans, that 40% that Lee just talked about, those are the individuals that aren't paying attention, but are going to say, well, we're for Trump, so we're going to be for Bernie Moreno.
Okay, and I have got one more final question for the two of you today. Mehek, I'll start first with you. What was something that you particularly liked seeing or didn't like seeing? I'll let you choose how you'd like to answer the question from the candidates today.
I saw civility. I saw Bernie Moreno thank Matt Dolan for his veto override under Governor DeWine when Governor DeWine did not stand for what girls should play in girls sports and boys should play in boys sports. I saw Frank LaRose and Bernie Moreno also exchange some polite words. You saw a little bit of credit given where credit was due. And I think that's so important as Republicans, because at the end of the day, we may have differences in policy, but we're still on the same team. We need to take Brown down. The way to do it is at least to compliment one another when somebody's done a good job. So that was really nice to see.
All right, and Lee? Same question to you. Anything you liked or didn't like tonight?
Well, I think it was a forum, but really a debate. I mean, there were certainly instances where they were at each other's throats. I liked Bernie's comment. Frank had pointed to some issues that Bernie had in his businesses. And Bernie said, look, Frank, you're using a Democratic talking point against me. I started business from scratch. I grew them to be billion-dollar businesses, and you're picking on a couple little things here and there that were bad. We should really honor and praise and treasure the growth of business in America, which is what Bernie has done. I thought Frank was very strong when it came to the social issues. That's really what he's running on. And I thought Matt was very strong on economic issues. Again, going back to his record at the state Senate, cutting taxes, cutting regulation, creating school choice. So each candidate tonight hit on the high notes that are the reasons that they're running for the office and why I think they'd all be great candidates to run in the fall against Sherrod Brown.
All right, Mehek and Lee, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you being part of our panel tonight.
Thank you.
All right, stick with us. We'll be back in just a little bit. When we come back, we'll have commentary from the Democratic side of the aisle.
Good feedback, hot takes from our Republican guests.
Yeah, they had a lot to say. They were saying on a lot of the issues, they felt like the Republican candidates had kind of been saying similar things. And big takeaway from our conversation is everybody seems to think that the Trump endorsement really is the thing that is sealing the deal here. They'd be quite surprised, they were saying, if it doesn't end up being, if history is to repeat itself, Marino on March 19th as the winner, but only time shall tell.
It will be interesting to see if their Democratic counterparts agree when we speak with them after this.
Yes, that's right. That's what's coming up next. In just a couple minutes here, we'll be talking with Democratic representatives. One of those is Democratic strategist Jeff Rusnak. He has played a role in well over 150 races at the municipal, county, state, and federal levels. That includes directing Ohio Supreme Court Justice Michael P. Donnelly's 2018 victory. Also, Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign here in Ohio. And he was also a leader in one of the groups that was really promoting Issue 1 here in November. So he was kind of key in the orchestrating of the passage of Issue 1, the people who were supporting that. That's one of the representatives, Jeff Rusnak.
Not to be confused with the Issue 1 where they tried to make it a 60% vote. Remember that one?
Yes,
that was a different one. He did not try and support that. That was in August. That was a special. He didn't support that. That would be silly based on what he is. Okay, we'll also be speaking with another Democratic representative. This is actual former House Rep Shayla Davis. She's the current president and CEO of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus. She was also formerly a council member at Garfield Heights. Go Bulldogs. She's also the Chief Strategy Officer, Grant Manager, and Director, Office of Minority Health. So we're going to be speaking with her as well and see what they thought.
That's some of her past experience, yes. And she was a member of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus. Now she's the president and CEO of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus Foundation. So she's doing all kinds of different things.
Nice transition. Nice save on me, too. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we will have former Rep Davis and Mr. Rusnak.
We'll see what they think. Welcome back, everybody, to Ohio Has Issues. What we heard from the Republicans, we're now going to hear from the Democrats. With me now, please welcome, we've got Jeff Rusnak, he's a Democratic strategist, and former Representative Shayla Davis. You guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Happy President's Day to both of you. I visited James Garfield's historical spot today, just out of reverence for him, obviously. That was fun.
Right in my neighborhood. That's great.
Beautiful setup we got over there. He's an underrated president, you know, obviously cut short in his prime and whatnot, but we'll talk about that later. We've got to talk about who might be the next senator from Ohio right now. Obviously, you guys both witnessed the forum, and of course, my first question has to be, why did they all almost always wear exactly the same thing? Blue suit, red tie, across the board. What is that? As a strategist, Jeff, is that intentional, I assume?
It's in the playbook. You know, I think they follow the script in the playbook. They're very hesitant to move off of their instructions and their manual. You saw that in their message, and you certainly saw it in their attire.
Shayla, do you agree? Would you think that they should be mixing it up for a little bit more, just from a sartorial standpoint, wearing different things to show different personalities, or do they really feel like they have to fall in line by wearing essentially a uniform?
They definitely believe they have to fall in line, and you know, I would appreciate much more color and some shift. It's funny, as I was watching, at one point I got confused on who was saying what, because literally all three looked exactly the same. It's funny to make that point.
Well, okay, well, let's get serious now and give me some initial reactions. Anything that jumped out at you right away that you said, well, that actually might move the needle, or that might be that's something new that we haven't heard before? I'll let you start, Shayla.
So I will say, surprisingly yet unsurprisingly, what they failed to talk about and what I represent that really troubled me is that there's a whole nother side of this conversation for Ohioans, and there was no conversation on Black Ohio, right? We have 1.5 million Black Ohioans, citizens that live here and call Ohio home, and there was no intentional conversation to really, you know, draw us in. There is a voter base there, and it's important that we be heard and our voices are elevated through the conversations when we talk about policy. So I was a little disappointed in not hearing that, but not surprised that I didn't.
Jeff, that's what jumped out to her. Anything in particular jump out at you?
Well, I think what jumped out to me was how they appealed to the fringe, the far, far right edge of the Republican Party. They're not doing anything to appeal to mainstream Ohioans, to independent voters, and they really are just catering to the most extreme fringe element of that party. And I think that's going to come back to haunt them. It's going to be really hard when they turn and focus on November to somehow get, I guess, to get a personality transplant or get some type of a conversion of philosophy and ideology, because they've really backed themselves into the corner here.
Shayla, they did talk about minimum wage. That was brought up, and they all addressed it, and they all had a pretty similar stance on minimum wage with a little bit of variation. How did you feel they spoke to that?
I thought it was cringeworthy, if I'm being very honest. I found it very disrespectful to hardworking Ohioans, but hardworking Americans, to not really talk about a prevailing wage and to say that the harder you work is how that will determine if you earn more money. We know in this country that is not a true statement at all. And they all, shied away from saying the value and the importance of that. But they did talk about the increase in the economy with gas, housing, and all of those things. Well, if a person is simply working extremely hard and continuing to get minimum wage, it doesn't help with those issues, which is why families are suffering here in Ohio. And I'm honestly hoping that Ohioans are very offended by that. We are a working state, right? A working class state. And there should have been much more respect given and true answers to those questions.
And Jeff, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I was just going to build off of
Please.
that. Look, there's nobody who's been better to working Ohioans than Sherrod Brown. I mean, Sherrod is the candidate of working Ohioans. He's made a career out of that, made a life out of that. It has been his focus, his number one commitment is to working Ohioans. And all you have to do is look at how he lives and votes every single day and acts in the U.S. Senate, and you see that. And so it is disingenuous for them to try and take an issue like that on.
I did think it was interesting that they did spend a significant amount of time, for it being a primary campaign, they did spend a significant amount of time attacking Sherrod Brown and Joe Biden as if we were already in a general election. Why do you think they spent so much time going after him rather than each other?
I'll let you go with that, Jeff.
Please.
So I think that's, I think they've backed themselves all into a corner here. Every one of them's backed into a corner. And so what they're trying to do is, they're basically saying the exact same things. So so they have to turn it and say, well, it's really about Sherrod. It's not about my opponent here. It's all about Senator Brown. And frankly, that's a losing proposition here, because what they've done, they are the candidates that are appealing to the most conservative extreme element, and they're not appealing to middle Ohioans, everyday Ohioans, and those who are, independent voters here in particular that are going to decide this election. And so when their position on reproductive rights was, frankly, it is laughable and it is appalling what they said. They forget that 57% of Ohioans just voted in November, and 57% of Ohioans voted against their ridiculous attempt to hijack democracy in August. And so, they can't win on those issues. They can't, that's government interference. They're supposed to be the party that's against government interference, but there's two examples of where they wanted the government to interfere in everybody's lives every day.
Representative Davis, they all did speak on the abortion issue today. Did you hear anything different out of any of the candidates that you have heard that you hadn't heard before? And how big of an issue do you think this is going to be in the campaign?
I didn't really hear much different, but I was very intrigued, and I had to write this note down about the pro-mom, and being pro-mom is about creating opportunities for a mother to have dominion over her body and a choice. Being pro-mom is making sure that there's a prevailing wage for people to live and work every day in Ohio. Being pro-mom is ensuring that a person can go to work and come home and feed their family. Being pro-mom is having the ability to choose where your housing is going to be and to be able to afford that housing. So, it was a lot of rhetoric, and they were saying the same thing, but they weren't saying much of anything. They were really just leaving us hanging. I think the example that Marino gave was, someone on the plane helping a mom put a stroller away or something of that nature. That's nice, right? That's kind. And I think there are kind people all over the world, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a woman being able to make a choice as it comes, as regards to her body and what it is to be a mother and the decision. I mean, it's not a simple thing. And government doesn't have a right to decide that. And to Jeff's point, 57% of Ohio has already said that this is our responsibility to decide, and we've decided that. The conversation should be over.
Based on, I'd like both of your opinions on this. Based on, not just what we've seen so far, but specifically tonight, if you didn't want to see one of these candidates face off against Sherrod Brown, is there one that you fear the most or that you think would present the most challenge to Sherrod Brown in particular? I'll let you start, Jeff.
I don't really fear any of them because I think they're basically all the same. I think that they are coming from almost a sense of privilege. They've lived lives of luxury, all three of them. And so, it may be, a lot of what they talk about might be, that's real convenient that his daughter's flying on a plane and had somebody kind to her. But that's not the reality that most Ohioans are facing in the struggles that they face on a daily basis. And so I think, these candidates, one is more, is slicker than the other. I think they were competing to see who could be the slickest of the bunch. And I think they did a good job of demonstrating, how slick they all really are. And so I think, they're basically all the same. They're pushing the same agenda. And, in the end, Sherrod Brown is going to draw a strong or, a sharp contrast with them. And he'll be successful because of that. Everybody, Sherrod's record is very strong and very clear when it comes to working Ohioans, and nobody works harder in this state and campaigns harder, and nobody has touched more folks in this state. and Senator Brown, and that will pay off.
Representative Davis, you know that Sherrod Brown is now our only statewide Democrat, and
That's actually we have three Supreme Court justices.
Should have mentioned that. You're right. Good catch, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, do you believe, though, that this state has moved rightward that much to the point that Sherrod might have a harder time in this election than in the last one, Representative Davis?
After that debate, I would have to say absolutely not, but no, honestly, no. Ohioans know what they need. They know what they want. Sherrod Brown has been elected before. He will be elected again. These gentlemen, unfortunately, didn't say anything different. Same suit, same message is what I'm saying for tonight. I don't think there's any competition. I think it's a matter of us continuing to show up, have encouragement from the Democratic side to ensure that people are getting out to vote. We know what we need as Ohioans. We've been committed to the same thing. This is a working class state. This is not about privilege. This is not about, who can throw the most money around. This is really about everyday Ohioans, and I believe that we will prevail again and win this election.
Well, you both, before we go, I want to get one last thought from you on this. You both described the candidates as essentially interchangeable. Given that, regardless of which one of them comes out on top in the primary, what's one piece of advice you give to Sherrod Brown to successfully run against them and win in November? Shayla, please start.
I would say, and it's something that comes naturally to Senator Brown, it's be authentic. If there's one thing you can say about Senator Brown is he's authentic. You know who he is. He's not some phony or fake person. On the other hand, that contrast couldn't be clearer with the three folks that are competing in the Republican primary. They're about as phony as you can be. I mean, that's, there's nothing authentic about them. They're bowing over to kiss the ring of Donald Trump. They wouldn't even back the border deal because Donald Trump told them to do that. It's not, it's counter to what they actually believe. And so, there's a lot of lessons that came out of 2023 in terms of this state and where it shifted and how it moved and the majority of voters and what were created here. And let's not forget, that's the other thing is let's look at those, where those issues passed, where we were successful in 2023 and those voters have been awakened and are ready to move.
And Representative Davis, one piece of advice for Senator Brown before we go.
I utter what Jeff has said, just to continue to show up and be authentic and to ensure that everyone's voice is being heard. Continue to fight for everyday Americans. Talk about the wage gap. Talk about the unions, and incorporate more conversation about the Black community. We definitely have to talk about infant mortality when we're talking about, a woman having dominion over her body. And we want, all women to live, if they choose to have a child, as well as their child. But I just believe that as long as we continue to support and elevate the work that we know has already been done, we are on a good path for 2024. 2023, the November election really showed us what Ohioans want. And I think we are on a path to shift that. And so I think he's great, but we just need to continue to elevate that and keep the message really clear and out there.
Thank you very much to both of you. Thanks for your insight. We appreciate it. Will you join us again sometime and keep us informed as we get closer to this election?
Absolutely.
Thank you guys very much. Happy President's Day.
Thanks.
Same to you. Thank you.
Oh, we'll be right back with more Ohio Has Issues. special thanks to all of our guests who gave us some valuable insight following today's forum. Not a debate, a forum, everyone. And I know what you've all been waiting for, obviously. We sat through the whole program. Sometimes it was just an empty shot of the newsroom of just people getting coffee and stuff. Where are my Andrew Garfield trivia facts?
I have been waiting for them literally for hours.
On behalf of President's Day, I visited the Andrew Garfield Historical Society, I guess, today in Mentor, Ohio. And here are just some facts about Andrew Garfield. I believe he's our 20th president, but I might be wrong.
I wish I knew.
Bad thing to start with. I only have weird, interesting facts about him.
Okay.
Because that's what I'm interested in. You know?
Well, you can very easily Google which president he was. So it's fine.
Sure, but here's the goods. First of all, ambidextrous.
Oh.
And he could actually write, and he would do this to impress people. He could write in Greek with one hand and Latin with the other at the same time.
That's fascinating.
It's also kind of an arrogant move at a party. Like if he's like, can you want to watch what I do? I'm like, we've all seen it, James. I know, you can do both things.
Do you think he practiced that 1,000 times and only always wrote the same sentence?
Probably, most likely. But still, great party trick.
Yeah.
Another great thing about him, he was a professor at Hiram and the president there at Hiram College, where he taught his future wife how to read Greek. And then he wooed her while teaching her Greek. It was a professor-student situation. They got married, and she became the first lady reluctantly.
Scandalous.
He was also a reluctant president. He did not want the nomination necessarily. He went supporting a friend. You ever see those Hollywood things where they're talking about a movie behind the scenes and like, I wasn't even supposed to get the part. I went to support my friend. And then they were like, you've got the look. Well, that's what happened to James Garfield essentially, because in a brokered convention, he was the compromise candidate because he offended the least people at the time. So he became their candidate and then ended up winning against his will. He didn't even want the office, which is probably why he was such a cool dude.
I think that's probably just good life advice in general, to try to offend the least people. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you're saying. Some people need to be offended. I take it back.
Speaking of, last very important, probably the most important Andrew Garfield fact is that his favorite food of all time, no lie, squirrel soup.
Oh.
I mean, that's a man's man right there, though, am I right?
I guess so.
Not enough squirrel soup being served these days. That's probably where we're getting so soft as a nation.
Ooh, I'm going to pass on the squirrel soup.
That's all the Andrew Garfield trivia
But
I have, though. I hope you enjoyed it. Happy President's Day.
Thank you for that. That was fun.
We have some important dates coming up that we should let people know about, right?
We do. Tomorrow is a very important date.
Yes.
That is the Ohio voter registration deadline. February 20th. Check your registration, make sure you're good to go. If you're not, get registered tomorrow.
Then, of course, February 21st, that's just 2 days from now in case you're counting. That's when early in-person and vote by mail begins. That's right, you don't have to wait until March 19th. You can go in and do it as of February 21st.
If you want to request a mail-in ballot, that deadline is March 12th.
And then March 18th is the mail-in ballot. That's the return postmark deadline. That means no tricks after that. If it says that it's not, if it doesn't say the 18th or earlier, then they're not going to count that.
Yes, and March 19th is the primary election day here in Ohio. Polls open at 6:30 a.m., close at 7:30 p.m. Obviously, that's a reminder that we'll give you again closer to that.
And I would like to thank, once again, the Greco-Roman calendar for not landing on a Tuesday and St. Patrick's Day again this year, thereby making just a complete havoc of downtown. It was messy.
Agreed. Well, thanks for being with us this week. We've got some cool stuff coming up for you next week. Next week, we'll be talking about Ohio's proposed minimum wage amendment. And our guest next week will be One Fair Wage Organizer. That's a group that's supporting the minimum wage amendment, and her name is Mariah Ross.
We did hear from the candidates today. They had some strong opinions on minimum wage, so maybe you could bring that up and maybe you could play those clips and see if they have anything to say about that.
Yes, we will. We'll see definitely what the organizers are thinking about that, and of course also we'll have a reporter to get us up to speed on what's going on. We'll definitely hear about some of the people who are opposing this minimum wage amendment here in Ohio and all that good stuff. So that's next week when this show returns to Wednesday, because this was a special Monday edition.
Great job, everybody. We got through it together.
We sure did. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here on February 28th.
Thanks, Beebs. Producer.